you look back at everything you've been through, what do you see? Most people go quiet, not because the question is too difficult, but because they've never actually stopped long enough to look. They just keep running, from one goal to the next, from one year to the next, and then one day, they stop, look in the mirror, and ask themselves, everything I've done, what was it all for? Today, I want to tell you about someone. His name is Marcus, a man who lived through every kind of rise and fall life could throw at him, and from all of it, arrived at a lesson that I think a lot of us need to hear. Marcus didn't have a dramatic life. He didn't lose everything overnight. There was no single catastrophic moment. What happened to him was, honestly, very ordinary. And that's exactly what makes it worth talking about. Growing up, things went fairly smoothly. Decent grades, a decent life. But toward the end of high school, things fell apart. He didn't get into the school he'd planned on. He ended up somewhere that felt like a step down. And here's the strange part. That small setback opened a door he hadn't expected. He found his footing again, started a business. Things went well. Then they didn't. Then he got back up. Then he stumbled again. Up, down, up, down. But here's what I want you to really sit with. If Marcus's life had been nothing but smooth, he would never have learned anything truly deep. Everything came easily. He took it and moved on. Nothing heavy enough to leave a mark. Nothing that forced him to ask, who am I really? But if his life had been nothing but struggle, he wouldn't have learned much either. Because when everything is dark, you don't reflect. You just try to survive. Hope wears thin. And eventually, you stop looking back at all. Because looking back only brings more pain. Real lessons only show up in the space between, where you know what failure tastes like, but still have enough belief left to stand up and ask, what is this teaching me? That's where real growth begins. Then came a moment. Marcus sat alone and looked back at the full length of his journey, not to blame himself, not to feel proud, just to actually understand. And he realized something. I had been running very fast, but on a foundation I had never really stopped to check. He had never slowed down long enough to ask the most basic questions. What values am I actually building this life on? Who am I when I strip away every role and label? And if I lost everything I have right now, what would be left? And that wasn't a failure. That was a discovery. The kind of discovery that only comes to people who are willing to look honestly at their own lives. I've heard many people say, I wish I had slowed down a little to understand more deeply before pushing forward. They don't regret failing, and they regret moving so fast they never knew where they were going. Marcus told me something very simple, but it took me a long time to really understand it. None of us leave this life taking anything with us. The only thing that remains is who you became along the way. Not learning from books, but learning from every fall. Every time you got back up, every time you looked in the mirror and didn't recognize yourself, and then slowly found your way back. I want to be clear about something here, because it's easy to misread. Struggle doesn't automatically create growth. Plenty of people go through pain and come out having learned nothing, because they never stop to reflect on it. What creates growth is the moment you choose to look back and ask, what is this trying to teach me? That's the difference between someone who gets swept along by life and someone who learns from it. Marcus shared another story with me about the teenage son of a close friend. The kid was 17 when he decided to drop out of school, not out of laziness, not out of recklessness, but because he looked at what he was doing every single day and honestly admitted, "I don't see how any of this means anything to me right now." That kind of honesty takes courage, even when it's hard to hear. He went out into the world, worked all kinds of jobs, learned the old-fashioned way, by seeking out people worth learning from, trying things, and living with the consequences. 2 years later, he came back, not because anyone pushed him to, but because he had found his own reason to keep going. He started building his own path, not following a preset template, but moving towards something he had decided for himself was worth pursuing. And Marcus said, "On the surface, it looked like 2 wasted years, but really, those were the 2 years he found his reason to keep going, something he might never have found sitting in a classroom." This leads to one of the most important things I want you to take away. Where your awareness is, that's the world you'll see. Not in some mystical sense, in a very practical one. When all of your focus is locked onto one single thing, every decision, every relationship, every setback gets filtered through that one lens. Nothing more. But when your awareness expands, you start finding value in places you used to see as wasted time. Making a living is necessary. Nobody's arguing with that. But making a living is only a means. It is never the destination of a life well lived. The day you start seeing your daily efforts as a tool in service of something larger, that's the day you truly begin living with intention. When I asked Marcus, "What do you want your life to become?" he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "That question, I answer it differently at every stage of my life. And I don't think that means I lack direction. I think it means I'm still changing." I think that's one of the most honest and courageous answers I've ever heard. Because here's what most people don't realize. The answer to "who do you want to become" isn't fixed. It shifts with every new level of understanding you reach. As you grow deeper, what you want naturally changes too. Not because you're lost, but because you're growing. The person who answers that question too quickly, too confidently, is usually someone who hasn't really thought about it. But the person who can say, "I don't know yet, but I'm looking," that person is on a real journey. The meaning of life isn't a destination you arrive at and stop. It's something you uncover gradually, through every choice, every stumble, every time you slow down and honestly ask yourself, what am I living for? Today, I want to invite you to do one small thing and grab a piece of paper or open your phone and write down 3 sentences. The hardest thing I've ever pushed through is, "It taught me that. And now I understand that my life needs." It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be right the first time. It just has to be honest. Because every real change begins there. Not with a grand decision, but with a quiet moment when you're willing to look clearly at yourself. If something in today's story landed with you, leave a comment below. It doesn't have to be long. It just has to be real. See you in the next one.